Okay, Mama, I hear you. You went online because you are considering homeschooling your child and you don't know where to begin. So you did a quick Google search or maybe a chat GPT search and you looked up homeschool resources, homeschool curriculums, homeschool 5-year-old, homeschool co-ops, and then the name of your city. And every time you search something, you were incredibly overwhelmed with all of the options out there. In fact, you might not even be for sure that you want to homeschool your child. You know that you don't really want the public school. You know you can't afford private school, but you're trying to figure out, can I even do this? I think you can, okay? I think you can. A lot of parents, especially moms, doubt themselves. They think, I'm not really that smart, or I didn't have the best education. And what if I fail them? What if they get behind? What if I forget what they need to know? You won't, okay? It's really interesting. This is my 3rd year of teaching my children, as well as I taught a few others when I had my micro school. But this is the most exciting thing to me because I am learning with my children. In fact, I don't think my education was actually that great. The more that I'm teaching my children, the more that I'm learning new things, I'm going, oh, I didn't get a good education at all. Half the stuff that I thought I knew is wrong or has been proven wrong since then. So we're learning alongside our children. And actually a friend of mine in Bozeman said this to me when I was starting my school. And I told her, I know I can't homeschool. I don't think that I have the skills to do it. I don't think that I have the patience. And I was kind of a naysayer about this, which is why I started a school and decided to teach 14 other kids that were not mine. You know, that makes sense. But in that process, my friend said, well, you learn alongside them. And I said, oh, but I'm not really good at art. She said, yeah, well, neither are they. They're 6, right? So as you're learning art and you're learning geometry again, and you're refreshing yourself on some of these skills and you're teaching your child, you're reteaching yourself, and you're also learning a lot about yourself as a mother, right? You're learning patience, you're learning to connect, you're learning what interests my child, what type of learner are they? When do they work best? Do they work best in the morning? Do they work best in the evening? When do I work best? And also, how do I find time for self-care? I actually just read a chapter of a book that I'm reading while blow drying my hair. Sometimes I do lunges while brushing my teeth. So I'm not going to say that this is easy. I'm not going to say that you're going to have all the time in the world to engage in the things that you find important. That's definitely not going to happen. But teaching your child can be such a gift, okay? So here's where I started. I started with the school. And I started buying curriculums, and I started by hiring coaches and mentors. And then I started buying workbooks, and I bought science books, and I did all of these subscription kits that come to the house, and so on, building kits and all of these things. And I just surrounded myself with a bunch of clutter that never got done, never got used, never got looked at. In fact, I think the only thing that I looked at with any regularity was probably the form drawing book, because I don't think I can do form drawing without a guide, because you actually need to see the pictures. And I think the spelling book, although the spelling book, I started with my son in 1st grade and he was already spelling at a 7th grade level. And so he became really frustrated with some of those words where I was like, can you spell door? Can you spell cat? So you're going to get all that stuff and you might realize my son is way past this, or my daughter is way past this. So I found curriculums to be expensive. They take up a lot of space. They can be really heavy. They can be very limiting because you may look at the curriculum and realize my child is not interested in any of this, right? Sometimes the workbooks are good because they serve as kind of a guide. Like I would say with math workbooks, I definitely love math workbooks. And I will recommend Singapore Math. Singapore Math workbooks are phenomenal. There's a little bit of an example at the very beginning of each one of the units and chapters, and then you do all the practice, repetition. There's an answer key in the back that shows you how the skills are done, and it kind of models things out for you, okay? So math, you need workbooks, but everything else kind of comes together and unfolds naturally, and it's really, really beautiful. And I'm gonna go into how you can do these things and how you can teach your child at home curriculum free in some other videos. But I know that when you're first on your journey and you're researching some things, the first thing is setting up your classroom, right? Do I even have space in my house? I don't have a classroom. I've never had a classroom. Here I am. I'm living in Japan, and this is our classroom. Sometimes it's outside at that little table. Can you see the table? There's a table over there. Sometimes we're sitting outside. Sometimes we're in the car. Sometimes we're in front of karate. Sometimes we're waiting for the dentist or something, and we're doing our work kind of on the go. Sometimes we're doing things on a train, plane, or automobile, who knows? But you don't need a classroom. Here's what I would say, setting up your home, okay? Ignore the perfect classrooms on Instagram. It fits for some people, and if that's you, like, more power to you, mama. You've got the cans of the perfectly sharpened pencils. You've got all your crayons that are, you know, pre-sharpened. They smell amazing, and they're in these like color-coded cups, and you've got all your spelling words up on the, you know, refrigerator. Like, do you, okay? You're awesome. I am not that mother. I barely have enough time to drink my coffee while it's hot sometimes. But I've been able to do this, and I'm not stressed out. I actually truly love homeschooling my kids. So what I do instead of set up a classroom, and what I would recommend to a lot of parents, is let learning happen everywhere. Set up your home like a learning environment. For example, in your dining room, maybe you have a world map that's up on, like, above, you know, like one of the walls, like above where everybody eats. So everyone is always kind of looking at the world map. Or maybe something happens at dinner where you go, oh, actually, where is Paraguay, right? Let's find that on the world map. Maybe it's a scratch off map, and you scratch off all the places that you go, or you scratch off the places that you want to be, or maybe you thumbtack some things. So put a world map in there, or maybe a globe, right? In your sunroom or patio or your outside space, wherever that is, maybe you have seeds, you have binoculars, butterfly net, magnifying glass, and a basket full of books on everything nature. Maybe you even have a nature journal that's blank pages, and you have colored pencils or charcoal or just plain pencils that are outside. Maybe you even have like a flower presser, right? But the books that you have outside are about leaves, pollinators, different types of birds. They're about John Muir. Maybe you have biographies of David Attenborough. You have things on bugs. Maybe you have a bug catcher with a couple of books about bugs. You have things about weather patterns. And so you have these books outside that inspire your child to connect with nature, because so much of elementary, especially elementary science, is so much about observation, life sciences, biomes, ecosystems, weather patterns, seasons, and so on. So you have that outside. And then your kitchen. In your kitchen, you have measuring cups that the child can reach. And this is where they learn fractions, right? You have measuring cups, you have whisks, you have all of the things at your child's level for them to cook. You have kids' cooking books, you have kids' baking books, you have books about foods from around the world in your kitchen. And then let's go to the bathroom. So in the bathroom, you have books, you have poetry, you have fables, you have things that your child can read when they're, you know, doing their business. And then in maybe where you do a lot of your schooling, you have shelves that are filled with books on fantasy, fairy tales, mythology, biographies, adventure books, classics. You have all of these books out there. Maybe they're organized, maybe they aren't. I highly recommend organizing them so that they're easy to find. But in our house, especially because we travel as much as we do, we almost never have organized book bins. We have the I checked this out from the library and I plan to read it bin. And then we have the I'm done bin. Mom, please take it back to the library when you head to base, right? So that's what we have in our house. But our house and our cars and everywhere is always filled with books, right? Really the only thing other than setting up your home to inspire learning and inspire education and connection between one another is maybe a whiteboard. Maybe on the whiteboard you write a quote from someone, a historical figure, or somebody that you admire. Maybe it's from a philosopher. Maybe you have a cursive chart somewhere in the house. Maybe you have numbers and shapes that are tacked on the fridge, okay? It can be as simple as that. Maybe for us, like, we even have vocabulary cards, and we might put up a new vocabulary word for the week, tell the kids what it is, and then they see it every time they go into the kitchen for a snack, right? So you don't have to have the perfect classroom to inspire an environment full of learning. All we have other than that is we have main lesson books that we get from Mercurius USA. They're just blank page main lesson books with the curved edges. That's kind of a Waldorf thing. I'll get there. Onion skin pages in between, because we do a lot of work with crayons, colored pencils, and pastels, and sometimes ink. And so if you have the onion skin between the pages, it prevents the transfer for what was on one page to the other page. So I highly recommend that. And then we have sharpened pencils and colored pencils and our block crayons, our Stockmar block crayons. That's all we have, and we learn on the go. So don't stress about creating the perfect classroom. Don't stress about having the perfect, curriculum and all of that, because it will come naturally. And I want to speak to that. So let's say you have a first grader, okay? You have a first grader, and that first grader is interested in, let's say, knights, okay? They're interested in knights. You can use nights as an entire unit where maybe you're studying England and you read stories from Merlin or the Knights of the Round Table. And maybe in the Knights of the Round Table discussion, you draw a giant circle and you divide the circle into fourths and you decide how many people can sit on each quarter of the round table, right? So then that becomes like a math lesson. How many other ways can we divide it? If we color in one side of this fourth of the table, a quarter of the knights, they disagree with this side, so you get my drift. So you can do knights and teach a math lesson all at the same time, right? You can do swords, and maybe we're adding swords, subtracting swords, regrouping swords or weapons. Maybe we're talking about the different feasts that that the knights engaged in before celebrations and so on. And so then we have like a cooking lesson and we cook some of the things that were feasted on back in the medieval times. Maybe we're creating a timeline together and we're researching like the Knights of the Round Table and Robin Hood. Was Robin Hood even real? Where was Sherwood Forest? And what would Sherwood Forest have been like, okay, if it was in England? And then now we're researching the flora and the fauna of England. Maybe we get interested in falconry through this and your child begins to say, Mom, I want to know more about falcons and birds of prey. And so then that becomes your science lesson where you're learning about falcons and birds of prey and biomes and where else in the world do they live. And we get out a map and we shade in the different areas of the forest, the deciduous forest that they may live in. And then we think, well, what do they eat? There's a lot of fish on here. Well, England is a coastal area. So what kind of fish are along the coastal towns? And who might have been the king and the queen at this time whenever this was going on? And what happened before this? And what happened after this? And then what else are you interested in? Are you interested in the castles? Let's build the castles, but we're only going to use rectangles, squares, and triangles. And so now your first grader is having to design a castle, maybe using a ruler. Maybe this is where you talk about measurements. What would be good? Would we want them to be 6 inches high blocks or just 2 inches high blocks? How long should they be? Okay, so now we've got geometry in there. And we're talking about semicircles and structure and foundation and moats and flora and fauna. And we're doing great literature. Maybe we decide to take a quote out of a Robin Hood book that really inspires the child. Maybe we talk about other knights like St. George and the Dragon, and we go and we get that book, and then that inspires us to learn about the festival of Michaelmas and what was Michaelmas about and what is a saint. You see where I'm getting at? But that's just one unit, okay? And that's going off of your child's interest. And you're going, yeah, but you didn't teach spelling or punctuation or any of that. It's going to happen. And I'll tell you why. So let's say your child designs the castle and they design the castle and it's become a geometry lesson or a math lesson. And maybe you're talking about perimeter of the castle and the moat that you're creating and so on. And then you have the child write something, okay? But your child is a brand new writer. So as you're writing, you draw the lines in your main lesson book and maybe you measure them too. And you say, okay, so I know sentences are supposed to start with a capital letter. See, I'm playing dumb because the dumber that mom is, the dumber the teacher is, the more the child has to think and figure things out. And you might say, okay, at the beginning of sentences, there's something. Oh, you know what? I've noticed in most of your books, all sentences start with a capital letter. Do you think that tells the reader that that's the beginning of a new thought? And they go, oh yeah. Oh, you've noticed that too? Fantastic. Okay, let's put a capital letter. So what are we going to say when we start our sentence? The knights were brave, and then you're like, okay, great. Yeah, let's write the knights were brave. But I've seen the word knights and it is not spelled the way that night, like in the sky, like at nighttime is. It's not spelled like that. It almost has a K, kind of like a king, right? K-N, I'm going to look this up, and you look it up together, right? And you show the child, how can I find the answers to my problems? And then you're going to write, the knights are brave. And then in that, we're going to be talking about BR, bruh. What else do we know that's bruh? We got brown, we've got brave, we've got bright. Okay, what is Ave? Save, gave, right? Wow, this is amazing. If the E is at the end, it makes the A say its name. I don't even hear E in brave. Do you notice that too? Now, are we excited when we say the knights are brave, or are we questioning the knights are brave, right? Like I am Ron Burgundy. So what would happen if we put a question mark at the end? All of a sudden, we're talking about punctuation. Believe it or not, most of these are second grade skills, but it's something that a first grader can do. We are not going to reserve punctuation for the later grades. We're going to do it because our child is ready. And because we're writing about knights, maybe we model spacing by saying, would you like to put something in the middle of each one of your words so that we know where one word ends and one word begins? What should we do? Should we do Should we do, let's see, like a shield, or like, I'm taking space in between my thoughts because I don't want to be the one giving the ideas. I want them to fill in the ideas. No, Mom, let's put a sword. Oh, a sword. That's a great idea. So let's draw a sword in between each one of your words to make sure that the reader knows where one word ends and one word begins. And he says, yeah, the knights are brave. And he says with such enthusiasm that you say, well, we can't put a period there. We've got to put an exclamation mark. That way people know how to read it. The knights are brave. Okay, and then you go and you find a poem, right? And there's one that comes to mind. Brave and true, I will be. Each good deed sets me free. Each kind word makes me strong. I will fight for the right. I will conquer the wrong. And your kid gets so inspired that he says, Mom, I want to make a shield that says that. Fantastic. Let's go get some cardboard and some foil or some paint. And you go and you build a shield, right? Look at how much we've done in like one lesson. And this probably is going to take you like an hour maybe. And you could do weeks on this. You could do weeks on just knights and really, really dive into the material. And it's okay not to know anything about knights whatsoever. You're going to find out on your own. You're going to find out about family crests. You're going to find out about the Battle of Normandy and where the Anglo-Saxons came from when they got into England. You're going to find out about who was King Arthur, who was Robin Hood, who was Maid Marian, were these real people. You're going to find out about the royal family and the Sherwood Forest and falcons and birds of prey. And you're going to be using geometry to build this really incredible castle. All of this can be done with a first grader, and it's not on a curriculum. But the child is interested in it and therefore is wanting to learn. And because you're the mother and the teacher and you love connecting with your child and being excited about their interest, it just naturally unfolds. And look at that. I didn't even have to have a classroom. I didn't have to have anything up on my walls. I didn't have to pre-plan. I didn't have a curriculum that I used. I just decided to start with, what are you interested in? And my child says, knights. And I went, then let's learn about knights. And from there, I'm going to see, what does my child know? What does my child need to know? And how can I help them on their learning journey? You can do this, Mama. I know you can. Okay. Stay with us. Please subscribe. Please like this video. Share with your friends. There's going to be more coming to this. In fact, I thought about this morning. I have a girlfriend that said, I am so overwhelmed with my 8-year-old. I don't know what to teach him. I don't know what books to find. And I said, well, what is he interested in? And she looks at me and she goes, are you kidding me? Poop. He's interested in poop. And I thought, all right, that's a new one. But the more I thought about it, I thought I could actually teach an entire lesson on poop. I know that I could. There are books at the library on poop. Scat, animal poop, animal tracks, what animals eat that leads to certain poops. And then we could start talking about the digestive system. We could talk about why doctors are obsessed with poop. In fact, what else does a doctor do? How is poop used in hospitals? I'm like, we could do a whole lesson on poop. So don't think that your child has to be like the next Aristotle. They might not be interested in everything that you're interested in. Of course, please try to carefully curate what fills your child's mind every day. Choose videos and books wisely. Try to expose them to the greats through literature, art, music, composition, and so on. Great books I highly recommend. But every now and then, if your child's interested in poop, then we're going to study poop, okay? And we're going to find a way to make sure that the lesson works around what your child is interested in. This is why you are the perfect imperfect model for your young child. So stick with us. Shoot me an email if you want to learn more. ChelseaVailJackson@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Be well.